All right. Okay. So we have quite a lot of content. I'll be covering like the different methods that we have at Gravitee to make your life easier when it comes to automating your API lifecycle, your API management. Um, so just let's get started. Essentially, I mean, the whole point around automation in the context of Gravitee is scale and essentially reducing your exposure to bottlenecks. So we can take like very concrete examples where we find this pretty commonly with our customers. Single team owning the Gravitee platform with tickets coming in from other developer teams asking for their API to be deployed, their configurations to be updated, new policies to be created, and it essentially pretty much slow down the whole execution. So using automation tools, the goal is to change from that very slow pipeline to something much more efficient in terms of collaborations, like using any of the framework that we have. We can move from, for example, Git-based collaboration, where like other developer team will be able to send some pull requests with like new API templates they can fill. Everything can become auditable, and rather than using the console, the platform teams will be able to shift from defining standards on using like modern kind of like infrastructure as code methodologies. So before we go into that, just wanted to get a quick kind of like polling, trying to get a feel of everyone's level of awareness of these automation tools and if you are already using any of these. So we'll be sending a quick poll using the webinar tools. So you should see a quiz asking you how you currently manage your API configuration. So we've got a couple of options, either fully in the console. Otherwise, you could be using the management API, or the MAPI as we call it, to run some scripts. You can use the Gravitee Kubernetes Operator, the Terraform provider, or a mix. So I will just let you a bit more time to get your results in, but so far it looks like the majority of you is using the console. So it means that today's webinar will be quite relevant. And then looks like it's following the kind of like maturity stage of the different automation tools with the management API second and the Kubernetes operator third. All right, so let's keep going. So why automate API management? So I touched based a bit on that, but essentially you want to use these tools to get rid of like the most time-consuming operations. Gravitee is a very advanced tool, and the console means to let you change any setting, but it can be quite deep in the menus. And if you have to do it like API per API, that quickly adds up, especially if you have to do this across multiple environments. For example, for promotions, it can really take a lot of time. You also want to avoid manual errors. Maybe you want a better audit trail than the audit table that you have in Gravitee. And again, you want to spread the load and not be really bottlenecked by this process. And as well, there are like a lot of good practices, maybe with other tools that you are using, maybe with infrastructure, around infrastructure as code, around CI/CD. Maybe you want to trigger some automations. Maybe you want to run some tests after a configuration change, and it's a lot easier to do with CI/CD hooks, for example, than it will be to trigger something manually whenever you change something in the console. You might also want to have the full history of changes for your configuration, and that's where Git will come very handy. And if you want to reproduce this, maybe for testing or for disaster recovery, that's also very helpful to have like a full representation that's structured of like your various configuration, whether that's API, plans, subscriptions, policies, and a lot more. So when it comes to Gravitee, we have 4 main tools. So the first one is the Gravitee Kubernetes Operator, which essentially is an operator for Kubernetes that will reconcile a target state that you declare for resources in Gravitee. So these resources can be pretty much everything in Gravitee. We still have a couple of small gaps, but like all the main ones, whether that's an API, an application, a user group, are things that you can just quickly describe in a YAML file. And the operator will look at your definitions and apply that on your API management instance. Terraform is a bit of a newer open offering from our side. The first version of the provider was released this summer, and it's still in tech preview. We keep adding new functionality to it, and we target for it to become generally available in the next version or the one after. Management API, which is everywhere. So whenever you do something in the console, there is actually a management API endpoint underneath. The MCP, which is also a new offering, which essentially lets you add a specific API management tool to your MCP clients, like your large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, Cursor, and whatnot, and essentially interact with your API management in natural language. So some of these tools will have a different appeal depending on like how your teams are structured and in what environments Gravitee is being used. The GKO, the Gravitee Kubernetes Operator, will obviously make sense for Kubernetes shops, whereas Terraform, on the other hand, will be a lot more familiar to tools who are used to managing, for example, their AWS resources with Terraform plans. So it's really a matter of appeal. The management API and the MCP server are kind of like both tools that will be always available and can be used in complement of the previous tools. So it's really about like the use case that you have, whether it's about creating assets, or if you want to do like things like a migration, for example, the management API will allow you to wire the full pipeline in a series of scripts. If you want to just kind of get quick like lookups, like open-ended information request or quick updates, the MCP will be useful. So again, depending on your setup, on how you are how familiar you are with these tools. One might be a bit more relevant than the other. So let's jump into the Gravitee Kubernetes Operator. So a quick primer on it. It's an operator for Kubernetes that will add custom resources specifically for Gravitee assets. So as you know, Kubernetes is a container orchestration technology where essentially you manage your config files in YAML, and Kubernetes will kind of like essentially deploy like the desired state in your infrastructure. And operators essentially extend Kubernetes to manage specific application such as Gravitee. So in the case of Gravitee, this operator will introduce like new resource types, like all the things you will want to deploy into your Gravitee instance as kind of like native Kubernetes assets, so that you can use like the whole Kubernetes tooling for that. So what does it look like and how does it work? So as I mentioned, it's you're pretty much using some YAML manifests for each of these definitions. So like on the side here, you can see a very simple API v4 definition. So, you know, we've got different types of API in Gravitee, and the latest one are the v4 APIs. And essentially, you will be able to specify the kind of like traditional primitives on Gravitee, entry points, endpoints, like types, path, whatever. I mean, it can be as simple or as complex as you need. But the idea is that the operator will watch for like changes in this definition and reconcile the kind of like target state with the definition, so that your Gravitee actually leverage this. So why would you go for GKO versus other? Essentially, it lets you, in one of the nice pattern that we see with the Kubernetes operator is to use it for GitOps workflow. So typically, we have examples on our repositories, but you could use something like Argo CD or Flux to essentially look at a specific repo. And whenever a new change is detected, because say you have like pushed a new definition, it would actually reconcile the state of the cluster with the definition that is in the repository. So that's why we say GitOps or essentially API ops, is that you can really like use your software engineering kind of like collaboration workflows that you will use for software development, but apply to application definition and other Gravitee definition. So it's obviously declarative, and you can go from configuration to deployment, like straight into your definition. You can use all the tooling from Kubernetes, whether that's Helm charts, like the command lines from Kubernetes, kubectl. You can use like templates and variables with customized with this notion of overlay. You can use the role-based access control that you have in Kubernetes. And because it's it's based on repositories and on Git, then you can fairly easily integrate this with like your CI/CD tools. So I alluded to it a bit earlier, but the a simple way to see how that could work is the following. Essentially, you will have a watcher on a repositories or a set of repositories that will be used to store the definition and manifest of your resources. These watchers can be Argo CD, Flux, or others that will essentially use the GKE operator to reconcile the target state on Gravitee API management. So let's move to the next one, the Terraform provider for Gravitee API management. So again, like why Terraform for APIs? The idea is that Gravitee is one tool among many, or one platform among many in your toolkit, and it can be also easier potentially to use Terraform than to use Kubernetes if you are like not familiar with the latter. So it's a bit similar. Essentially, you keep your API definitions in API plan, so in Terraform files using the HCL language. So it won't be YAML in that case, and you will be able to deploy to apply these plans into your Gravitee gateway. So essentially, you again use the like the toolkit from Terraform, like Terraform apply or plan, and that will look at the remote state. Under the hood, it uses some specific API endpoints on our side. We'll try to see if a resource exists. If it exists, it will look if the definition has changed or if it has drifted. If it has drifted, then you can essentially change to erase the drift, to reject the drift, or to accept it. So it can also be very good to, again, like have like templates that you can easily deploy across environment for a lot of use cases. So I was mentioning it, but you use the same workflow for Gravitee that you use with your other tools. And that way, if you have to deploy like, let's say, a full environment in the cloud, whether that's infrastructure plus APIs, applications, plans, like you can kind of like bake everything into like a series of Terraform plans. So that can be a good way to kind of like keep your tooling a bit more streamlined. So state management is what I was mentioning. So Terraform lets you essentially kind of like catch any deviation from the state, and then pick the logic that you want to do. It's also possible, for example, to make a quick change, and that's actually something that we are adding on the product side. So it's not available yet, but it will be very soon. So we'll add sort of a break glass mod that will let you quickly make some change from the UI to a Terraform managed API. And then when you reapply the automations, when you reapply your Terraform plan, you can either choose to, again, like accept the drift or essentially get back to the original definition. So if you have any issue and you need like a quick remediation, you don't have to track the like someone in your team that is knowledgeable of Terraform and how these things work. And again, because it's infrastructure as code, because it's file-based, you can use version control for that. You can do like all the collaboration, rollback, CI/CD workflows that you need. It's also fairly lean to set up. So there is a Terraform provider that's versioned, that's being released kind of like alongside the main apping version. So you can essentially use that. You just need to have like a token that will be scoped with the right kind of like permissions from your Gravitee admin, and you can use that to authenticate. Typically, creating an API with Terraform is also very similar to what we've seen with the Kubernetes operator. It's just a slightly different kind of like set of key on values. So everything is defined on the Terraform provider schema, which you can find online. I think I have a link at the end of this webinar for you to take a look. There is one thing that is not yet in the product and that we are also kind of like working on at the moment is how you can easily export a definition of an existing API so that you can generate a Terraform plan for it. So Terraform has this Terraform import feature, which lets you just put an ID and kind of like make a lookup for that resource and get the plan for it. So this is not something that is in the product yet, but it will come. So for now, the way to generate a plan is to use if you want to convert an existing asset, is to use the definition export from the console or from the management API and get either the JSON or the CRD, which is the GKO definition file, and convert that to a Terraform file. But it's getting a lot easier thanks to AI agents, and we are going to have a native way to do that very soon. So in terms of patterns, what we are seeing from customers using Terraform, so a lot of them are actually using that for API promotion across environments. So let's say if you have different environments on your Gravitee setup, like dev, staging, and production, and you want to quickly kind of like reuse exactly the same API that have been kind of like tested and validated into staging and move them to production, for example. So we have customers that are exporting these definitions, creating Terraform plans from the definition and deploying them into like a new environments. So that's like one of the main patterns that we see. You can also use like some of the kind of like niceties of the Terraform definition files to create multiple variation of an API. You can use things like variables and kind of like keep a single definition that will create any number of resources based on this definition. And you can also use modules to do like layers on Terraform and reduce the complexity in terms of definition.
So, Marc, just quickly before you move from that section, we've got a question on the Terraform topic. Daniel is asking what is operational from a Terraform perspective for 4.10. And I know that you talked a bit about that what is coming soon, what is not, but what can we clarify there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so in terms of the Terraform provider, it's been around since the 4.8, so we are currently in 4.10. It's just that in terms of maturity. Technically, it's still in tech preview on our side. Having said that, I think that the engineering team won't be like won't be making any breaking change to that. So it supports creating APIs, applications, shared policy groups, subscriptions, and obviously kind of like all the entities that you'll add for each. So if you look on the Terraform registry, the latest version is the 0.4, which has all these resources. So just in terms of kind of life cycle, so once some technologies of like enough maturity on our side and won't be changing more, we are essentially moving to GA, general availability. And the target at the moment around Terraform is either for the upcoming Gravitee version, so for 11, or for 12. But we have customers already using that in productions, either for their promotion or migration use cases. And it's mature enough and stable enough for that. It was more about potentially introducing changes, but I don't think we will. So we've been actually targeting for 10. No, we just moved this to 4.11, but we haven't made any structural change to Terraform. I hope that that answers the question.
Thanks, Marc. We actually got one more on Terraform. Basically, they're asking, Chris is asking whether it supports V2 APIs and related resources.
No, so while the Kubernetes operator supports V2 APIs, I don't think that's the case for the Terraform provider. So it's V4 APIs, and I'm not sure that V2 APIs will be coming. To be honest, I haven't seen that on the roadmap, but I can check again with the team, and we can maybe just do a quick follow up on this one.
On that, thanks.
All right. Okay, so maybe the management API. So the management API is the essentially, I think there is like I don't know many path methods on endpoints, but essentially you have an endpoint for everything you see in the console. And if you open the developer tools, like you can see on the screenshots on this slide, you can see like all those calls to a management URL for your Gravitee instance. And so yeah, I mean, if you want to like script your way around Gravitee, you just have to essentially look at the requests that are being exchanged like in your browser. We have a Postman collection on our GitHub, which is in open source and that everyone can access, with like the most kind of like common operations, and I would encourage people to get it. It can be fairly handy, especially if you're looking at automating some parts of Gravitee. And again, like the management API is kind of like pretty much universal in Gravitee. So it can be a complement, for example, for things that you can't do in Terraform or that you can't do in the Kubernetes operator. And it can also be used for like very sequential automation, where you would like to create like lots of different resources with a very granular approach. So for the resources that are covered by the Kubernetes operator or by Terraform, and if you are comfortable with these technologies, like the let's say the definitions are a lot easier to manage in YAML or in HCL. But if you want kind of like the biggest reach and pretty much like change anything in Gravitee, that's where you will look. So it can be for like very like straightforward operations, like creating a new API, or creating a plan for that API, publishing, like changing the state of an API, or even like getting your definitions. I was mentioning that some customers are using the management API to export API definitions and then recreate Terraform definitions for these. So that will be like the way you will do that. There is kind of like an export endpoint where you can get that. You could also, again, like integrate this into your CI/CD pipeline to kind of like perform some automated tests or just kind of like validate that like a definition is correct, for example. So that's again like very easily accessible and covers a lot of things in Gravitee. Or promoting. So one of the big kind of like patterns that we see in Gravitee is around API promotion. So again, like this use case where you have a set of APIs that you are working on in an environment and you want to bring them into like another environment. So it can get a bit complex depending on whether assets exist in the target environment, whether the IDs are the same, or if you need to change the IDs. So that's why it's good to have like a kind of a set of standard automation for that have been kind of like battle tested. And it's one of the topics that we will most likely cover in like a next webinar. Essentially, what are the different types of IDs that you can have in Gravitee, and like what product use what IDs, how to make sure that these exist, and if not, like how to kind of create them, because that can be like one of the like first obstacles that you will meet in your automation journey, essentially. Sorry, I was planning to have some demos, but I actually had some issues with my setup, so I'll skip the demos for today. I'll just cover the last kind of like topic on the automation tools, and then we can have like a quick recap on some more questions. So the Model Context Protocol, MCP, is a new kind of like standard. I mean, not very new anymore. It's been around for, I guess, good 9 months now, or something like that, or if not a year. And essentially, that has been around exposing tools for AI agents, LLMs, so that they can make use of them natively. So what we did with Gravitee, we don't have any kind of like agent integrated right into the console. That may be something that will be coming, but we have essentially created an MCP server that implements this MCP protocol on top of the management API, which, as I mentioned, is kind of like fairly powerful and can do pretty much anything in Gravitee. So you've got this MCP server that you can install locally and configure in like any MCP compatible client. Nowadays, pretty much all your IDs or like agent tools are. And then you can use that to kind of like ask questions in natural language to your API management platform. That can be about creating assets. That could be about kind of like understanding where things are or how they are related. I don't know, like what plans or what policies are activated for an API, how many subscriptions there are for a given API. Even get like some specific metrics, like getting a breakdown of like all the error codes that have been happening for a given endpoint. So it can be a good companion to have. And again, it's just like the management API. It's something that you will use in complement of your main use of the platform. Like if you are doing things in the console, you can also have like an assistant that's wired on the console that you can use to help you locate things. You wouldn't want to manage your whole Gravitee with just like MCP tools on an agent at this stage. Maybe that's something that we'll get to, but I don't think that a lot of products are there yet and will want to go there. Like you still want to kind of get a deterministic approach for that kind of things. But when you have kind of an open goal, that could be a good way. And that's also a very nice way to explore the capabilities of the products or to know about like settings, configuration by kind of like just asking and see what is configured there. So about the maturity migration on getting started. So that's what I was answering just earlier. So GKO has been around for I think at least 2 years. It's getting like regular release, same as our main API management product. So we have our quarterly kind of like minor release. We have major release coming up a bit more seldom when we introduce like very new chunk of features, and then we have our maintenance releases like more often in between minors. And yeah, so GKO will essentially follow the API management. There is also, since the version 4.10 of Gravitee, an official compatibility policy between GKO on the API management version that you use. So we have now an engagement to support the last like 3 versions of GKO on new APIM release. Like the opposite wouldn't work, because otherwise the GKO will be calling endpoints that do not exist. So it can only work in one direction. But the great thing is that now you don't have to do like both upgrades, both updates at the same time. You can first go with APIM and then with GKO without kind of like breaking anything, as long as you maintain that kind of like 3 versions between the two. So Terraform is in tech preview. So there are still a bit more like kind of like gaps in the coverage, or like it can be a bit harder to adopt. Typically, I was mentioning about the like the lack of import capability of an existing API as a Terraform resource, for example. So those are more like the limitations that I will see. if the Terraform coverage, as it is at the moment, allows you to do your to perform your use cases in terms of kind of like stability and reliability. The fact that it is in tech preview is not really an issue. It's more you can find gaps in the type of assets and resources that you want to manage with Terraform, and this is kind of like being added into the feature. So over time, Terraform will get to the point where the GKO is. And even on GKO, I think we still have a few small gaps and things that we do not yet support. For example, it's not possible to declare and deploy a dictionary with the Kubernetes operator, or I don't think you can do the same with API keys for subscription. So those are well known, well identified, and also kind of items that we want to bring in, so that essentially you get as much of parity as you can between like these automation framework and the management API, for example. So the management API, it's been around forever. It evolves with each kind of like release of the API management. And whenever we introduce a new functionality, you will see that it's got new endpoints. So for example, in the 4.10 version, we have this new framework for analytics with a completely new analytics engine, which comes with a new renderer for dashboards, but also a new API to get metrics that is used by these dashboards. So if you take a look when you load a dashboard in the analytics section, you can see that you've got those APIs endpoint to get like metrics or facets, which are like those new analytics capabilities. And same for the MCP server. So it's following the APIM releases. We may at some point kind of like bake the full logic into the management API, because under the hood, it's just kind of like a sort of a wrapper for agent on top of the management API. So for now, it's two different projects. We may kind of merge them, but again, like it should be pretty seamless. And I mean, as far as I know, for now, we don't really have like customers with like kind of production grade automation. For the MCP, it's more of a help to kind of like understand Gravitee or explore usage and that kind of stuff. But I would be very actually interested to know if some customers are using it for that. So in terms of pattern to import, so for GKO, you can export like any existing API as a CRD file, so a YAML file that you can then use as a Kubernetes definition for the Kubernetes operator. You can use the management API to bulk export, because at the moment it's one by one, and you can kind of like transition. So for the Terraform, so ultimately it will be possible. So here it's a bit in advance. It will be possible to use the import command using an ID. For now, it's not there yet, but yeah, I mean, we are pushing really hard for this to get there. And then once it's there, you will be able to kind of like import and generate like an HTML plan for it. There will also be the break glass mod that should allow to kind of like capture a drift into like a new plan that you can also reflect like in the definition. And for the management API, again, like I'm pretty sure that you all know, but you can export definitions from the console and get like the full JSON for an API. So yeah, just a quick wrap up. Essentially, like as soon as you start to have like several dozens of APIs. We've got customers with hundreds of them, multiple environments. Like, you want to look into these automation tools, whether that's for to be able to quickly redeploy a Gravitee instance, or to improve collaboration, to start to like proper kind of like promotion processes from an environment to another. And for this, you will look at your tools, like what technology you're comfortable with. If like Kubernetes or Terraform are options, and you don't have to kind of like adopt the whole thing at once. I mean, at least for Terraform or for the management API, you can kind of like keep some API in manual mode and just have APIs that are automated in terms of definition. And yes, I mean, keep an eye on like how to interact with the Gravitee platform using MCP. So we have product to govern MCPs, like our MCP proxy or agent tool server, but we are also using this MCP server to kind of like interact with Gravitee, which is kind of like the other way around. So yeah, I mean, take a look. It can be pretty interesting and a novel way to interact with the platform. So yeah, I mean, everything is documented. For the Terraform provider, I would encourage you to look at the documentation that is on the Terraform registry itself, rather than the Gravitee documentation. So we have made the choice to have like the most extensive documentation there, and you will find like complete example schemas for like all the type of resources. You also have like the whole OpenAPI spec of the management API that is on our repositories. Yeah, don't overlook the Postman collections. It can be good to see like what kind of like flows or operations are in there. The MCP server has its own repository where you can find the configuration on the install instructions. And yeah, you can find obviously a lot more information on our just the documentation site, all on the community forum, on our YouTube channel, and on our blogs. And you can contact me directly if you have any questions that we didn't get to cover today. I'll be happy to take that async if you want, but I think we still have a bit more time. I'm hearing Jorge ici, so maybe let's see if we can take a few now.
Yeah, thank you, Marc. That was great. I think you've covered some of the questions, because some of those questions came pretty early on, and then as you went through the webinar, probably you covered some of those. But we had one from Bogdan, for example, talking about whether does GKO impose any restrictions on where the gateways are deployed?
I mean, you want to have a Kubernetes cluster for the gateway, and I think we have some kind of like example setups on our GitHub repositories. I can also send some links. It's pretty well described into our documentation. I'm not sure if the question is about the type of Gravitee deployment, like between kind of like cloud, self-hosted, or all that kind of stuff.
I believe so, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, it should be usable around the board. Let me see. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll cover this one. I'll just kind of like check if we have any non-restrictions I can post. Maybe you can move to the next question in the meantime.
Yep, sure. All right, I've got one. Let's see if I get it right. So with the evolution of versions of APM, for the API definition JSON, is there any risk that an old file cannot be compatible with a higher version of APM? So it's like after 2 or 3 years or even more?
I mean, it's more about that's why we version our API kind of like format. So typically, as I mentioned, we have our API v4 at the moment, and we used to be on v2 earlier. And if you look at all of these automation tools, so they have a different support for API v2 and v4. So you wouldn't be able to use a v2 for a v4 target now, as long as the support for the API generation exists for the automation tool, it shouldn't be an issue. So we are trying as much as possible to avoid any breaking change, and that will be like a good example. So in a general manner, that shouldn't be the case.
All right. I've got another one pretty specific as well. So Daniel says, promoting APIs from different environments seems interesting, from dev to stage QA production. If Terraform can operate with Gravitee's API JSON that includes policies and not only the YAML files, can it do that together with changes in API members' rights?
So the way the promotion work with Terraform and the Terraform plans are structured, so by kind of like it's not using a JSON definition as a primary definition source. It's using those HCL, which is the language from HashiCorp, which has given us Terraform. So it's using HCL definitions, but as part of this, so you will have like different keys and values, and you can obviously kind of include like the different policies that will apply to an API. So some of them, so you can find some JSON in there. It really depends on the schema, and there is a notion of like nested schemas. But yeah, I mean, you should be able to kind of like bring an API from you can bring an API from one environment to another. Again, the biggest challenge can be like if you're referencing some user or user groups, for example, that do not exist in the target environment. So like whatever is in the definition of the API that is not kind of like being created in the plan can kind of like generate an error. Now, under the hood, the Terraform provider is using an API, a specific API on your Gravitee gateway, which is called the automation API. So it's also part of you have the logic for it on our GitHub repositories. There is also an open API spec for it. So it's pretty, whenever there is an error, the error are kind of like pretty smart, and you can essentially look at what failed on the like automation API. If it's an ID that does not exist, for example, it's something that you will be able to catch. It can be a bit tricky at times if it fails silently by experience. But again, like we are trying to kind of like catch all these cases. But yeah, I mean, so far we saw that that's the biggest use case for Terraform, and that's where it's been easier. It's for this kind of like cross-environment promotion. So yeah, I mean, it's we will be adding some we were actually planning to make some sort of like white paper on that or webinar. So I will encourage you to stay tuned, as it's a topic that some of our engineers are very keen to document, and it can be pretty powerful.
That's great. Yeah, that's a good idea. And we've got just one more question, but before that, I have just trigger a last an end of webinar poll for you guys to kind of provide some feedback so that we can improve and we can continue creating great content for you guys. And the last question is from Bart on what's the recommended way to define APIs with the MCP tools for OpenAPI spec feature? Enable our state in GKO Terraform?
So, like when it comes to the MCP server, that's where like it can be a bit tricky at times to use agents to create or like with deterministic flow. So if you just go on kind of like prompt the MCP server to create an API with a couple of inputs, if the API is complex, it can kind of like fail. So essentially it will put together a JSON definition of the API and it will try to apply it. And it may kind of like do a first attempt, fail, and then try again and maybe get there. I think that like a good way, as is the case with pretty much any agent tools or any agent interactions these days, is to kind of like show the agent a good an existing sample or like a couple of good patterns on ask them to reapply that or to kind of like go from there. I mean, that at least that's where we see like it helps them to get there. We were actually discussing internally the opportunity to create a Gravitee skill, as in agent skill, that will come with some kind of like examples of object definitions that could help agent to become better at using like such tools. So that's like those are for now just kind of like open recommendations, but we will be kind of trying to make this a bit more deterministic. And I mentioned a bit AI in Gravitee, like as part of the console. So also as part of this kind of goal of ours, we are also trying to make assistants better at creating working configurations, if that makes sense. So stay tuned on that as well. It's one of our topics.
Cool. Thank you so much, Marc, for all your knowledge, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar. We are right on time. So again, have a good day, and I'll see you on the next webinar.